The air in the private dining room of the Gilded Anchor was thick with the scent of aged mahogany and unearned superiority. Crystal glassware shimmered under the chandelier, casting fragmented rainbows onto the starched white linen. It was Eleanor Hawthorne's 75th birthday, and her celebration, like everything she planned, was a meticulously curated display of affluence and familial hierarchy. Elias sat rigidly beside my son, Daniel, in a corner seat that felt conspicuously relegated. Across the heavy oak table sat my sister, Chloe, her husband, and her son, Marcus. Chloe wore a self-satisfied, knowing smile, the kind she usually reserved for mortgage-closing documents and exclusive country club newsletters. Marcus, 21 and already radiating the smug confidence of a second-year law student at an Ivy League university, held court with the extended family, regaling them with anecdotes about moot court and summer internships. Daniel, my 19-year-old, was predictably on his phone. His head was bowed over the screen, his dark hair falling forward, obscuring his expression. To anyone else, it looked like disrespect, the social atrophy of a young man addicted to a screen. I knew better. His phone was his office, his lab, and his canvas. What he was doing on it was far more complex than anything happening in this room. The tension, which had been a low, persistent thrum beneath the polite chatter, spiked when my mother, Eleanor, tapped her sterling silver fork against her glass. A hush fell. Eleanor, poised and regal in deep sapphire silk, stood, her eyes sweeping the room, landing finally on me. "Thank you all for celebrating this milestone," she began, her voice a polished, resonant contralto. 75 years, and I can truly say I have achieved everything I set out to: a successful business, a beautiful home, and most importantly, a legacy. She spoke for several minutes about the importance of ambition, of traditional success, and of making your mark in the real world. Her words were laced with thinly veiled comparisons, praise for those who followed the path of law and finance, and pity for those who, she often implied, chased airy ideas. Then came the moment, the turning point of the evening, and perhaps the turning point of my life. She paused, her gaze locking onto Chloe's son, Marcus, who straightened his spine, ready to receive the benediction. "And what is a legacy?" Eleanor continued, her voice softening just enough to convey sincerity. "Without the assurance that the next generation will not only maintain it, but elevate it?" "Marcus, stand up, darling!" Marcus rose, accepting the applause with a modest, yet utterly triumphant bow. "The grandson," my mom said, her voice rising to carry over the renewed clapping, "I am actually proud of." The air went out of the room for me, replaced by a sudden, sickening vacuum. It was a vicious cut, delivered with the calculated precision only a mother who knew your deepest insecurities could manage. I felt Daniel flinch beside me, a barely perceptible tightening of his shoulders, but his head remained bowed over his phone. That was the most painful part, that he didn't even look up to defend himself. Because he was so used to the dismissal, Eleanor's eyes flicked over to Daniel, a quick dismissive appraisal before settling back on Marcus. Then she delivered the coup de grace. The line that confirmed her intent was not pride, but pure, humiliating malice. "Not the one who's always on his phone," she added, a light, musical laugh bubbling up, joined by a chorus of compliant, nervous laughter from the assembled aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone clapped, my hands resting on my lap clenched into fists. For years I had tolerated the slights, the casual dismissal of my career as a digital consultant, the constant comparison to Chloe's stable, conventional life. But this wasn't about me. This was about Daniel. This was about crushing his nascent confidence in front of the entire family. Eleanor, apparently satisfied with the effect of her words, sat down. She reached into the small beaded clutch resting next to her plate. She pulled out a crisp, brand-new bill. It wasn't $5,000 in cash. It was a novelty, oversized check, the kind banks use for charitable donations. But this one was printed with the number $5,000. She had clearly ordered it specially. Then she slid the $5,000 bill to me like a joke. The check landed on the white tablecloth with a whisper of starched paper, the mock serious signature of a local bank manager adding to the insult. The $5,000 was the remaining balance of a small business loan she had given me a decade ago for a fledgling tech venture that eventually failed, a failure she had never once allowed me to forget. Just a little reminder. "Dear," she murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "We wouldn't want the successful ones to carry the weight of the less successful. You can pay me back whenever you get off that ridiculous self-employment cycle." I stared at her, heart beating steady. Not fast, not erratic, but a cold, heavy thump, thump, thump of absolute certainty. The joke wasn't the money. It was the public shaming. She was cementing my status as the family's financial loser in the same breath she crowned the family's hero. I didn't move. I didn't reach for the check. Minutes passed, or maybe only 30 seconds. But in that stretched, crystalline silence, the air of celebration around them began to sour. They were waiting for me to laugh it off, to blush, to apologize. I did none of those things. I simply held her gaze, a deep, unnerving calm settling over me. I looked at Daniel. He finally lifted his head. His eyes, usually bright and full of abstract thought, were shadowed with hurt. But beneath the hurt, I saw a flicker of the same cold resolve that had just settled in my own chest. We exchanged a look, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of this public humiliation. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. The sound of wood scraping the marble floor was deafening. "Daniel," I said, my voice low and even, cutting through the celebratory chatter that had nervously resumed. "We're leaving." I placed my linen napkin beside the untouched soup bowl. "I did not touch the novelty check. Elias, don't be so dramatic," Chloe hissed, leaning forward. "It was just a joke." "A joke is funny, Chloe," I replied, my eyes still fixed on my mother. That was a statement of intent. Noted. I walked around the table, putting a comforting hand on Daniel's back. As we reached the door, I paused and looked back at my mother, who had finally lost her composure, her face drawn in a knot of confusion and anger. "The debt will be settled." "Mother," I promised her, my voice clear, "every penny, and the true value of my son's time will be understood. I guarantee it." We left the room, the sound of the heavy oak door clicking shut, muffling the sudden, awkward silence we knew we had left behind. Part 2. The quiet brilliance, the drive home was quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the muffled sound of Daniel's breathing. He wasn't crying, but his silence was more eloquent than any tears. I pulled over to a dimly lit overlook that offered a view of the city, a sprawling galaxy of lights that suddenly felt less inspiring and more like a cruel, competitive landscape. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, putting the car in park and turning to him. Daniel finally broke. He wasn't loud. It was a quiet, defeated choke, tears rolling down his face as he stared out the window. "Why does she always do that, Dad? Why does she always make it seem like what I do is a waste of time?" I reached out and gently pulled him into a hug. He leaned into me, his body shaking slightly. This was the love, the deep, fierce, protective bond that fueled my entire existence. "She doesn't understand, Daniel. She only understands what fits inside a neat labeled box: lawyer, doctor, banker. She doesn't have the imagination to grasp what you're building. Marcus got into Wharton, Dad. He's doing real things. I'm just tapping away at code on a cracked screen," he whispered, gesturing to his phone. "No," I insisted, pulling back and holding his gaze. "Marcus is following a well-trodden, established path. You, Daniel, are creating the path. You're rewriting the rules of the entire landscape, and I'm going to prove it to them. I need you to tell me exactly where you are with Project Chimera." Daniel wiped his eyes, taking a shaky breath. He had started the project 2 years ago, initially as an automated trading bot for micro-investments. It had since evolved into something far more sophisticated. "The beta is fully stable," he explained, his technical enthusiasm momentarily eclipsing the emotional pain. "We solved the volatility issue by layering in predictive sentiment analysis based on real-time news APIs. The real breakthrough, though, is the liquidity pool automation. It's not just predicting market moves anymore. It's dynamically reallocating asset exposure faster and more efficiently than any human fund manager possibly could. The returns in the simulated environment have been averaging 18% weekly for the last 6 months. We're ready to launch with seed capital. We could go live in 3 weeks, maybe less. I nodded, absorbing the data. Daniel wasn't playing Candy Crush on his phone. He was refining a financial engine that had the potential to revolutionize high-frequency trading. His constant phone use was a necessity. He was monitoring global APIs, running diagnostics, and communicating with his remote, anonymous partners. And the seed capital? I asked. We need about $50,000 to secure the initial cloud server infrastructure and the legal framework for the LLC. Maybe another $20,000 to cover initial licensing fees and administrative costs. The partners are handling 70% of that. I need to cover the remaining $21,000. I smiled. A slow, dangerous smile that didn't reach my eyes. 21,000. Peanuts. I can get that liquidated from my retirement fund by Tuesday. But we're not just funding the launch, Daniel. We're funding the revenge. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a worn, folded piece of paper, my own copy of the promissory note from a decade ago. It was for $10,000, half of which I had paid back immediately. The $5,000 she brought up was the remainder, plus interest she constantly recalculated. Your grandmother doesn't understand money, Daniel. She understands control and public perception, I explained, the cool, calculating part of my brain taking over. She used the $5,000 as a weight to hold me down. We are going to turn that weight into a feather and use the air current to lift us so high she can't breathe. What are you going to do? He asked, a spark of curiosity replacing the hurt in his eyes. I'm going to pay her back, Daniel, but I'm going to pay her back in a way that is utterly unambiguous, final, and humiliating for her. And then, we're going to give the family the news they couldn't possibly appreciate at that dinner. The news of the creation of the Hawthorne legacy. Version 2.0. A legacy that has absolutely nothing to do with her. The feeling was intoxicating. Not just the thought of revenge, but the surge of pride in my son, in our shared secret, and in our collaborative future. I felt a love so profound it manifested as a vow. I will never let anyone hurt my son again. Over the next 3 weeks, our small apartment turned into a mission control center. Daniel, fueled by the sting of Eleanor's words, worked with a focused intensity that left me in awe. I handled the logistics. First, the $21,000 for Chimera was secured. I used my severance from a recent mutual departure with a client who valued traditional methods over my modern digital strategies, a perfect, ironic twist. Second, the $5,000 debt. I didn't want to just write a check. That was too clean, too easily dismissed. I needed drama. I went to my bank and arranged for the withdrawal of $5,000 in crisp, brand-new $100 bills bundled into 50 stacks of 10 notes each. I then placed the stacks inside a sleek, lacquered presentation box, the kind used for expensive luxury watches. I also had my legal team draft a formal, notarized debt release agreement, stating that upon acceptance of the enclosed sum, the promissory note would be null and void, and all future claims against Elias Hawthorne concerning that matter would cease. The grand stage for the revenge needed to be perfect. As luck would have it, Chloe was hosting a family success luncheon in 2 weeks to celebrate Marcus securing a prestigious summer associate position at the very investment bank Eleanor had always wanted me to work for. It was another opportunity for public crowning. I received the invitation, a minimalist card with gold foil lettering, and immediately accepted. 2 days before the luncheon, I received an update from Daniel. It's done. Dad, Chimera is running live on the cloud. The initial seed trades are executed. The legal formation is finalized. We're officially a registered LLC, and I just received a message from the initial round of venture capital inquiries. They saw the early performance metrics. They want a meeting. Hold them off for 48 hours, I instructed. We need the shock factor. We need the reveal to be clean, and we need the family to hear it from us, not from a news alert. I felt a giddy mix of nervousness and anticipation. I practiced my lines in the mirror. I needed to be calm, rational, and utterly dismissive of their world when I delivered the final blow. This wasn't just about paying back $5,000. It was about reversing a decade of toxic control. The family success luncheon was held at Chloe's sprawling, impeccably manicured suburban home. The atmosphere was light, sunny, and insufferably self-congratulatory. Everyone wore pastels and spoke in hushed, reverent tones about Marcus's promising future. When Daniel and I arrived, the air shifted subtly. Eleanor greeted me with a thin-lipped, formal kiss on the cheek. I was beginning to think you wouldn't come, Elias, especially after your little scene at my birthday. Oh, I wouldn't miss this, Mother. After all, I came to settle a few overdue accounts. Her eyebrows arched, betraying a flicker of greed. Accounts? What are you talking about? The $5,000? I said simply. I believe you ordered a novelty check, so I thought I should reply in kind. I carried the lacquered wooden box under my arm. It felt heavy and substantial. The luncheon proceeded. Appetizers were served, champagne corks popped. Finally, Chloe stood, holding a crystal flute. To Marcus! She beamed, her face glowing with maternal pride. He's secured a summer position at Sterling Capital, a true launchpad for success. He's carrying the family legacy forward. Polite, loud applause followed. Marcus, standing next to his grandmother, looked every bit the gilded youth, nodding graciously. Eleanor stood with him, placing a possessive hand on his shoulder. Chloe is right. This is what success looks like. Calculated risk, traditional values, and a healthy respect for money. Her eyes deliberately sought mine, the message clear. Take notes, Elias. I waited until the applause began to die down. This was my moment. I cleared my throat, not loudly, but with enough deliberate intent that the sound seemed to echo in the well-appointed room. With all due respect, Mother, I began, my voice clear and steady, commanding attention. I think it's time we redefine what success and legacy actually mean in this family. And it's time I closed the books on some very old business. I placed the lacquered box on the center of the pristine dining table. The contrast between the dark, glossy wood and the white linen was stark. Eleanor stared at the box, confused. What is this, Elias? More of your dramatics? I ignored her. I took a key from my pocket, turned it in the small lock, and opened the lid. The 50 bundles of crisp, new $100 bills lay nestled in the velvet interior, a stark, physical manifestation of $5,000. It looked like movie money, offensively tangible in that subdued room. I slid the debt release agreement across the table, careful not to touch the cash. There is the remainder of your $5,000 loan, Mother, in fully notarized and accounted funds. Please sign the attached document, which nullifies your claim to the promissory note and ensures this particular conversation never happens again. A low murmur rippled through the guests. This was drama of the highest order, a public reckoning. Eleanor's face was a study in conflicting emotions, relief that the money was finally here, and fury that I had made such a humiliating display of it. You didn't have to do this here. Elias, she finally whispered, her composure cracking. No. I didn't, I agreed, my tone glacial. But you chose to make the debt public, Mother. You chose to use it as a weapon against my son. So I'm closing the account in public. Consider this the cost of that joke. She picked up the pen with a trembling hand and scrawled her signature on the release form, her eyes darting between the cash and the faces of her guests. The shame was palpable, but it was just the appetizer. I took the signed form and slipped it into my jacket pocket. And now, since we are talking about success and legacy, I continued, turning to the room, I want to offer a correction to the prevailing narrative that has been championed in this family. The idea that true ambition can only be found on a path approved by a 1980s boardroom. The idea that a young man working quietly on his device is simply the one who's always on his phone. I looked at Daniel, who finally, slowly, lifted his head and met my gaze. He was nervous but ready, Daniel, I said, loud enough for every cousin and aunt to hear. Show them what you have been building. Daniel pulled up an external display on his phone, connecting it via a small dongle I'd hidden beneath the table to a large screen Chloe used for family photos. The screen, which had seconds before displayed a slideshow of Marcus receiving an academic award, went black, then switched to a sophisticated, real-time dashboard covered in elegant data visualizations, rapidly updating charts, and complex financial metrics. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel began, his voice initially soft but gaining power as he spoke. For the last 2 years, I have been building Project Chimera, a proprietary, deep learning algorithm for hyper-efficient decentralized financial asset management. He started a demo, walking the family through the interface. He explained, in clear, concise terms, how his system was currently managing several $100,000 of real capital, executing trades with an effectiveness that outperformed major industry benchmarks by a factor of 3. The names of the indices and markets he cited were instantly recognizable to the more financially savvy guests. In the 5 minutes since I projected this screen, Daniel continued, gesturing to a number at the top of the dashboard, Chimera has executed 43 trades across 4 markets and generated a profit of $281. The $5,000 my father just repaid was an investment in a past that failed. This, he indicated the screen, is an investment in a future that is running right now. The silence that descended upon the room was absolute. It wasn't awkward. It was stunned. The air grew heavy, not with superiority, but with the sudden, crushing realization of missed potential. The sound of Marcus clearing his throat and muttering, "But that's just coding, Daniel," only served to amplify the magnitude of the reveal. Then, the celebration collapsed. A high-pitched, insistent ping sound emanated from Eleanor's phone, which was lying on the table beside her. It was a unique, customized alert sound she used only for the most significant financial news. She picked it up, her expression a mix of annoyance and confusion. Her eyes scanned the screen, and the blood drained from her face, leaving her marble white. "Mother?" Chloe asked, concerned. Eleanor raised her trembling hand, struggling to find her voice. It's the news feed. Bloomberg just reported on the VC round." I looked at Daniel. He gave a tiny, triumphant shrug. He hadn't been holding off the venture capitalists. He had simply scheduled the announcement. Eleanor read the headline aloud, her voice barely a rasp. "The Quiet Revolution. 19-year-old founder secures $4 million seed round for decentralized finance disruptor, Chimera LLC." The report went on to detail the groundbreaking nature of the algorithm and the high valuation of the company, a valuation that instantly made my son, the boy always on his phone, a multimillionaire founder, before he could legally drink a beer. His success wasn't measured by a degree or a corporate title. It was measured in capital raised and market disruption. It made Marcus's summer associate position look like a polite internship. It made Eleanor's $5,000 debt look like pocket change lost in the cushions of a couch. The sound of the clapping was replaced by a deadly, profound stillness. Eleanor looked at the cash in the box, then at the screen, then at Daniel. Her eyes filled, not with tears of regret or maternal pride, but with the searing tears of missed opportunity and profound public foolishness. She had belittled a phenomenon right into existence and had just accepted the payment for a forgotten debt from a man who was now implicitly wealthier than she was, funded by the failure she constantly mocked. I walked to my son, placing my hand firmly on his shoulder. A silent apology and a promise rolled into one gesture. "This is my son, Daniel," I announced to the hushed room, a raw, protective triumph in my voice. "He is not always on his phone. He is always building. He is my pride, and this is the real legacy. The revenge was complete. It wasn't harsh words or a vicious counter-joke. It was a cold, irrefutable demonstration of value, delivered at the exact moment she attempted to assert her false hierarchy. It was sweet because it was earned by the person she tried to tear down." In the weeks that followed, the family dynamic was permanently fractured. The shame of that luncheon hung over Eleanor like a shroud. She tried to backtrack, of course. She called, praising Daniel's latent talent, and suggesting that perhaps she could offer consultation on the business, hinting at an investment. I handled her with the same cool detachment I had shown at the table. "The window for your consultation closed. Mother, when you handed me that joke check," I told her over the phone, "Daniel has a team of advisors, all of whom understand that always on your phone in the 21st century means always working. We don't need your approval. We certainly don't need your money. The love that drove me was for Daniel, and that love now dictated the necessary boundary. I could never let her toxicity pollute his success." Chloe called too, her voice tight with a pathetic blend of envy and forced admiration. I always knew Daniel was brilliant, Elias. Marcus's path is just so stable. Stable doesn't build empires. Chloe, it builds cubicles, I replied, allowing myself that one last, small dig. The sweetest part of the revenge, however, wasn't financial or public. It was watching Daniel evolve. The boy who was once bowed over his phone with his hair hiding his face was now confident, articulate, and utterly in control during investor calls and board meetings. He still spent his time on his phone, but now when people saw him, they didn't see an addict. They saw a visionary. 6 months after the luncheon, Daniel officially launched the consumer-facing version of Chimera. The company was now valued at over $20 million. Daniel insisted on one thing, using a fraction of his success to finally settle the debt in a way that truly mattered to me. He bought me a small, beautiful mountain cabin, the one I had always dreamed of using my original failed $10,000 startup loan to purchase. He signed the deed over to me and included a note that read, "The initial investment didn't fail, Dad. It just took 10 years to mature. We did this together. Love, Daniel." It was a quiet act, a personal redemption that wiped away the financial and emotional stain of the past decade. It was the tears of joy I shed, reading that note in the silent, clear mountain air, that finally washed away the bitterness. Eleanor and I still see each other at major holidays, but the power dynamic has reversed. I am no longer the indebted supplicant, but the father of the family's true success story. She approaches me now with a hesitant respect, forever haunted by the memory of the day she slid that $5,000 joke across the table, only to have her own celebration collapse in the wake of a $4 million headline. The revenge wasn't just sweet. It was a necessary declaration of independence and a powerful testament to the value of a father's unwavering belief in his son. The true victory was the love that redefined success,